my camera is showing on the screen. That's probably adjusted by your computer side. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then I think we're good. Okay. Well, I'm delighted to introduce my former PhD advisor, Xiaoliang Qi from Stanford University as our speaker for today. So Xiaoliang's research career very much embodies the spirit of Ivy. He has made valuable interdisciplinary contributions to the fields of condensed matter physics, quantum information, quantum gravity, and most recently, AI. In addition to being an accomplished physicist, he is also the co-founder of an AI startup called Path Integral Technology, which develops AI tools for scientists with the goal of eventually promoting these tools to AI scientific collaborators. I think his perspective on AI very much aligns with the goals of Ivy, and I'm excited to hear his insights. Today, he's going to be talking to us about recent work on sparse autoencoders. So without further ado, take it away, Xiaoliang.
Okay, first I would like to thank Una and AIMI for inviting me to give the seminar, and thanks very much, Tamara, for your kind introduction. Uh, um, and so today I will talk about some ongoing work. Hope it's almost finished about analyzing the non-locality of sparse autoencoders. As you will see, this is related to both my interest in quantum gravity and in AI. So I think in general, um, these directions like quantum information and quantum gravity and machine learning slash AI, they are they look very different, but they actually have the common theme, which is using some kind of geometrical way to describe the structure of information. I think that's the unifying theme that's common for all these different areas. Of course, geometry in the case of physics may means some like three-dimensional, four-dimensional geometry, but in the case of AI, it may mean some high-dimensional like connections between different neurons, different nodes. But I think in general sense, it's like capturing information in some connection way. So that's why motivates me to talk about this. And this the outline is that I will give some overview of sparse autoencoder as a way to understand the AI models, to interpret AI models, and I will give some kind of um, intuition and also some detailed definition, and then I will make the analogy with holographic duality, although I won't go to details about what is that in physics, but just some analogy, and then I will define some measure motivated by physics that I want to analyze the sparse autoencoder, and then I'm going to analyze some properties of it. Um, so um, this work is in collaboration with Chu Lin and Shivaji Sondhi. Chu is a student of Shivaji in Oxford, and hopefully it's going to finish soon. And then, in addition to the three of us, I also would like to acknowledge our AI collaborators, and they are very helpful for bringing me to start on this project because I only have the vague idea. I have no idea about how to actually like get a sparse autoencoder and do the calculation about them. And these are what the AI agents really helped me a lot. So I feel like they are collaborators, and I'm not sure whether I should acknowledge them as the models like GPT and Gemini and Cloud or the agents like Codex, Anti-Gravity, Cursor. So I think they are kind of wearing the hats of the agents. So that's what I make. And this was also generated by Gemini, this image. Okay, so what is sparse autoencoder? I understand that some of the audience are probably very familiar with these, but maybe not everyone. So maybe a lot of these overviews will be kind of elementary for you, for some of you. So basically, the idea of autoencoder is the picture above. So look at some data like y. Imagine y is some whatever data, right? Like samples of images or samples of text, or in what we will talk about later, like some internal layer vectors of some models. So whatever data, y is some probability distribution of some data with these lines represent its dimension. So think y as a vector, like in the case I draw 6 lines, so y is like a 6-dimensional vector. And then this encoding and decoding is a pair of maps that with the goal of reproducing identity. So you define a way to compress the data into a smaller space such that after decoding it reproduces the same y. So your goal is to make y tilde very similar to y. Um, and then this so it's clear that if your input distribution is like totally random, then it's very hard to do this, right? So what happened is that the input data has its own structure in it, so that it doesn't really cover the whole like 6-dimensional space of Y. So therefore, it's possible to compress it into a lower dimensional surface in it. So that's the idea of autoencoder. And this is a way to understand the structures in the data because when you try to find the optimal compression, you reduce the redundancies and you find the independent features that determine the structure of data. So like if you give it all a lot of the images of the cats, probably it's going to extract some different features of the cat rather than pixel by pixel, right? So that's the kind of compression which will let you understand what are the signatures, what are the characteristics in this data. And then there comes the idea of sparse autoencoder, which is a little less intuitive way of compression, but it has some advantage. So that's the bottom picture, which says that you map your data y, which is a vector, into an even higher dimensional vector. So if you have no constraint, this will be trivial because, of course, I can just embed the lower dimensional vector to the higher dimension and then map it back. So that will trivially reproduce identity. But you're not allowed to do that because you add some requirement that the higher dimensional vector is sparse, which means that there's only like a few elements that are significantly bigger than zero. So you are allowed to map it to a bigger space, but with the condition that most of the components are very close to zero. So that has the advantage that you're kind of decomposing your data into some orthogonal components. Like you say, maybe I have only 6 dimensions, but maybe there is like 16 different features that matters for me. And then, but these 16 features never simultaneously act. Maybe only two of them acts every time. So then I have to keep all the 16. So I cannot use the ordinary encoder. So I will like map some of them to the first axis, some of them to the second, some of them to the third, and so on. So that's the idea of the sparse autoencoder. I also draw this picture as a different way to illustrate that, right? So it's like you start with some probability distribution of your data, and then you map it to an even higher dimensional space, which is the feature f. So here I draw data as 2-dimensional and the feature as 3-dimensional. But then you have the requirement that whatever points y you have, the image of the given by the encoding map is close to the axis, right? Of course, in general, maybe it's not close to the axis, but close to some lower dimensional surface because maybe you have more than one features activated, but there's only finite a small number of them. So then what so then this tells you that these axes are kind of forced to have some meaning because they are independent because they don't even coexist in the same state very much. So they have independent meaning. That's basically the intuition behind requiring to have sparse autoencoder. And then there are different ways to do this, but one common way is that you allow the encoding map to be nonlinear, and then you require the decoding map to be linear. So you map the encoding map maps the input y to a high dimensional vector f, and then the decoding is just a projector to the lower dimensional, project back to the low dimensional. I guess you could require both of them. You could allow both of them to be nonlinear, but that's probably not necessary. So this is what people often do this. Any questions? I would like to hear if you have any questions or comments during the talk. I think that would be helpful. Okay, good. Um, so this sparse autoencoder is is a useful way to analyze different kind of AI models, and in particular, it has been used a lot in understanding LLM because these large language models we it's kind of a black box so that we don't really know what happened, like how the model predicted the next token. So then the smart autoencoders is used to interpret what the LM is thinking. So, um, for example, part of my motivation came from these works of Anthropic. They have a sequence of works about this in their website. Um, where they analyze the the cloud models and they find that okay, we can get many such features, and at least some of these features has a nice interpretation. Like there is one feature called Golden Gate Bridge, and then different language of Golden Gate Bridge all activate that feature, and then they also show that you could control what the models say by increase or decrease the weight of that feature, which means like you if you come here and then your internal layers vectors are mapped to these features, and then if you artificially like enhance one of these features, um, then correspondingly like the model has a higher chance of speaking about Golden Gate Bridge or like talk about Golden Gate Bridge. Whatever you talk about with the model, it kind of make connections with Golden Gate Bridge. So it's an interesting example that shows that these features has some interpretable meaning. And then there's more recent works that try to use these and analyze them in a deeper way. And just to talk about a little more technical detail on how this is how on the language model and the sparse autoencoder in it. So the sparse auto so the large language model um, the structure of a typical transformer model that's decoder only is like this, right? It's like you have your input tokens, and then they are converted into vectors. So your input is a matrix, which is like a bunch of vectors, x1, xt, 2xt, each of them is a vector. And then every layer of a transformer contains some attention and some MLP, and then some like normalization and so on. But overall, um, the in the end, the whole transformer layer is mapping these input vectors to the same size of to 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 the same number of vectors in the internal layers, and then the next layer will map it, and then in the end, the output will contain at the corner the next prediction. The prediction will be here. Will be. Do you see my cursor? Okay. Yeah, so the prediction will be in the next layer. Sorry, it would be in the last output. And then, so basically the thoughts of the model is all in these internal layers. And one interesting feature of the LLM kind of transformer model is causal because you can only predict next token from the previous one. So the attention is only to the previous tokens. So the horizontal direction is like time. Like every internal layer, like the red dot here, will only depends on the thing on the past, which is on the left of it. It also will only depend on the thing below it, right? Because it's a regressive, right? It's you start from the bottom and then go up. So it's actually like a two-dimensional model with a light cone, right? In the physics language, like there is some internal layer vector which depends on everything in the shaded region. So, and then so basically all the information are in these red dots in these internal layer vectors, but we don't immediately know how to read out that information, and that's what the sparse autoencoder wants to help to do. So when we introduce this sparse autoencoder, what we do is that for a given set of input data. Let's say you have like a huge data set of different text, and then you use that as input. So that's a probability distribution of the input X. And that input will map to a probability distribution of the internal vector, right? So if you focus on one of them, if you only look at one of them, okay, then you get like this vector. Just think about the vector as like a point on the sphere, and then it has some probability distribution, and then you can use a sparse autoencoder to map that to a bigger dimensional space. So you have an input, maybe thousands of dimensions, and then you map it to a output which is even higher, like 10,000 or 100,000 dimensions. And then that high dimensional vector will be mapped back by a linear map to some vector. And then you are training this encoding and decoding map such that the output is close to the input. The probability distribution of the output is close to the input. Okay, so you can do that everywhere, right? So you can take the first layer, second layer, third layer. You can take that and then insert this kind of encoding and decoding separately. And after that, you get the sparse autoencoder interpretation of each of these different locations of the internal token vectors. So this makes this is why okay, because I am interested in quantum gravity. Um, this is something that made me feel like similar to a physics phenomena called holographic duality. This was first proposed by Maldacena in 1997. And this holographic duality basically says that there are like two kind of theories which look very different, but they are actually equivalent. And one theory is like some quantum field theory living on let's a lower dimensional space. Let's say that in this case it's like a two-dimensional space. And then there's another theory which lives in this hyperbolic space with one higher dimension. And these two theories look very different. One has the right-hand side, this higher dimensional theory has gravity, and the lower dimensional theory has no gravity in it. So they look very different, but they are actually, and there is a correspondence with each other. And the correspondence is such that the things that are not local in the theory at lower dimension looks local in the theory in higher dimension. Like if you have some particles that sits at different locations in this field theory, then they actually all from the boundary theory point of view, they are all like living in this plane, but they have different size. That's the picture I'm drawing on the right. Like the operator is closer to the plane has a smaller size, and then the operator further away has a bigger size. So you can think this as basically like a VR, right? Like everything is on the screen, but depending on their like collective motion pattern, it looks like further away from you or closer by, right? So, but in this case, in the case of these physics series, the thing that looks close by is more like a like short range degree of freedom in your system, and then the thing that looks further away from you are like more collective dynamics. So exactly how to define such maps and make this duality precise, that's part of that is still open question. So Tamara and I had several works along these lines in recent years. And and I should also acknowledge that this connection, the possible connection with sparse autoencoders, that's an idea that there was a discussion with several students and postdoc here, Aditya and Kafir and Bruno, and that's I think that's part of the thing that inspired me to work on this. Um, so. Okay, so basically, like to you can get some more intuition, like what happened to this series. It's like there are two descriptions of the theory, and one of them is simpler than the other. That's why this duality is useful. So if you think about like you have a really complicated theory on the boundary, which is on this surface, then there's some local perturbation, and then it spread, become bigger, becomes a complicated thing, and then maybe it come back and become simple again. And then from the bulk theory point of view, that's simply something moving deeper in the bulk and then come back. Right? So like, and there are cases where it doesn't come back, like there is a black hole and then it falls into the black hole. And in that case, it's like what is called a scrambling. Right? It's like there's some degree of freedom, which there's a local perturbation which becomes covers bigger and bigger range in space, and then just disappears, becomes so complicated that you don't see it anymore. So these kind of things are useful in physics. And then the question is, when we think about sparse autoencoders, that's like we do them because in the original token vector we don't know how to read out the meaning. So these meaning like concepts, right? Like I'm talking about something. Maybe I write 100 or maybe I write 200 words, but then if you summarize it, you're going to say like, oh, this paragraph is talking about life. In particular, is focusing on like evolution of animals, for example, right? So like there are concepts which are kind of abstract things behind these complicated data vectors. And then so maybe they are like this bulk dual degree freedom, right? Like they live in a different space, and then they are better representations of the complicated phenomena, and they are kind of independent from each other. And the other thing that seems to be to have an analogy is that there is like different depths, which is like some concepts are more abstract and therefore they are related to more things, and then some concepts are less abstract, so they cover the smaller domain, right? So it's like there are dog and cat, and they are both animals, and then animal and plants, they are both life, right? So you have like different levels of concepts. So not only there is a concepts which plays an important role in the representation of language, but there is relation between the concepts. There is some kind of sense of like level or and the distance, like some geometry of the concepts. So that's the motivation. But I mean, as you will see, we I don't have a very good description of these, but it's like some minimal steps towards these directions. Um, any questions so far?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, so in SE, what defines so in sparse autoencoders, you go to larger dimension. What defines the dimension that has like large contributions to it? Like, do you set that as a hyperparameter, like the number of finite dimensions? I guess.
Yeah, I think the euro way to do that is they just add a cost of having more
I
uh,
see.
features activated. So you are not actually requiring how many will be activated. It's like
Yeah.
if you look at the distribution of the activation, it's probably like decaying exponentially, and then there is a width. So you know not many feature will be activated, but it's not a hard cutoff.
Yeah. So I have a follow-up question. In holographic duality, there is like this d dimension to d plus one dimension thing, right? Where you have a
Yeah.
correspondence. Is this like a more generalized version of that idea where you have like a dynamical dimension of the sparse space that is determined by the data?
Yeah, I don't know what's the analog of the. I mean, roughly speaking, the intuition from holographic duality is the actual dimension is the scale, right?
Yeah.
Like things deeper in is larger scale, more non-local.
Mhm.
So in that sense, probably when we think about these spatial encoders, we are also thinking about that kind of scale. Like I'm going to show things about how its influence depends on it's how like certain features have a bigger range of influence. Yeah, but I don't have any concrete like proposal. Like, what's the difference between emergent one dimension versus emergent two dimensions?
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
I also have a couple of questions. So when training these sparse autoencoders to learn representations, maybe you have different levels of abstraction for different concepts, and maybe you want to see that larger depth. You were capable of expressing more abstract concepts. This is maybe an idea that people had. Even way back with feed forward networks, they were hoping to see this structure and they
Right.
weren't able to, and maybe sparse autoencoders could be one way to do that. I have a technical question, which is, well, if you want to extract something like that to maybe even see the hierarchy tree behind the level of abstraction, do you correlate the training between the different sparse autoencoders, or you just let them independently, vary and I guess just hope that they land on similar representations or like related representations, I guess.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't know how to do that, but I think there are works trying to um, instead of like taking every internal point and then train the sparse autoencoder for that, uh, I think you can try to look at different parts and then train something that's not local in that. Like 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 um, like instead of just point by point, maybe you can look at the collection of them and map them to the sparse autoencoders, which is kind of related to what you're saying. Yeah, but I don't know any I don't know works where they train sparse autoencoder for each of them, but they are correlated. Um,
Yeah, maybe like I'm imagining something like in the last layer, maybe if you're doing something like, identifying a cat or a dog, and we know that, there's certain characteristics that are shared between them, and different values of those characteristics is going to tell you whether it's a dog or a cat. They both have a tail. Maybe they both have like, ears or whatever, but the fur pattern is different or whatever. So I was just wondering if you could somehow like uh yeah, I correlate the higher order information that you might extract at the low level features and then like, the actual thing. My other question is, so earlier you mentioned with the sparse autoencoder, you're allowing your representation to exist in a high dimensional space, but you impose a sparsity condition on it.
yeah.
And you said that this is still a version of compression, but I want to maybe make a distinction between allowing the vector to exist in that higher dimensional space but be sparse versus, maybe forcing it into a low dimensional subspace. Because in physics, we want to find like a low dimensional effective space to work with so we can just throw away the higher dimensions. But it seems like generically, here we can't do that because even though we impose the sparsity condition, any one of the high dimensional components is allowed to be non-zero, I imagine. So it's kind of like maybe if I make an analogy and with images, the spice of possible images is like naturally high dimensional. And we can't really reduce that fundamentally. But maybe there are these peaks or like, narrow peaks or maybe even delta functions around natural images. So even though each one is like kind of effectively low dimensional in its neighborhood, like you still need the whole space, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it's like the number of features which are independent from each other is not necessarily smaller than this dimension of the vector, which means
Mhm.
like the number of orthogonal directions in the space of the internal token vector. But like every time when we talk about something, we don't talk about all these features at the same time. Like every time when you talk about something, there is only a smaller number of features which are activated. And small means smaller compared with like how many tokens are in what we talk about. Otherwise, the summary will be meaningless, right? So yeah, so like it's like every time we use some small number of concepts, but if you look at the whole data of all different conversations, is the number of concepts is huge. So that's why like I need a big space of features to start them, but I want to make sure that you are doing a non-trivial job of summary in the sense that every time there's a small number of features being activated. And this is similar to like in the case of holography, like it looks like boundary is a smaller space, the bulk is a bigger space. So how could they be equivalent to each other? And then like for example, in the constructions we worked on, like you map it to this bigger space, but with the requirement that actually you are only thinking about the really dilute particles in the bulk. And that's kind of very similar. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Okay, no other questions. I will proceed. So, okay, so what we technically want to do, this is the page where we defined the key measure in this work, which because I'm interested in how non-local is a concept. Um, so, so one way to measure how non-local is this concept is how many input tokens will have a significant influence to it, right? So this lower the bottom is the input, right? The input token vectors. So non-local means like let's say if I'm talking about animal, then there is like different parts of the sentence that are related to animal. Or if I talk about something really abstract, then maybe more things depends on it. I don't know. So that motivates us to look at this gradient, this Jacobian, right? So your input, this is a vector, and then if you take a particular feature A, so A is this label of the feature. So there is like let's say 10,000 features, and then you take one of them. And probably you want to take one of them that's activated by the input, right? You take one of them and then just take the gradient, um, take derivative over the input components, and the input has two labels, right? The mu is like the vector label. Let's say your input is 500 dimension, then mu is like 1 to 500, and then t is the position. Okay, so you get this matrix, and then you could define something like a two norm, like just square it and sum over the input dimension. So A is fixed. So for a fixed A, this I square is basically like if I take my input vector and then move it around in that space of input vectors, how much does that change the feature FA? Right? Like if I look at a little epsilon ball around that input vector space, how much change of F does that map to? And then you get that. So that's the size of the circle I'm drawing. Like maybe these tokens will change the F a little bit and the other tokens doesn't have an effect. And then you plot that, normalize it, and you get this curve. And then, okay, I want to know how non-local is the curve, which means that how non-local is this sort of probability distribution. So this PT and T prime, N is a layer index. So T and N is fixed. So Tn is fixed here. And actually, the only thing that matters for a particular input is like T prime that's bigger, that's earlier than T, right? Because of causality. So afterwards, it has no effect. So T prime is like somewhere start from T and go backwards. So if you plot this as a function of T prime, and then you normalize it, you can call it a probability distribution. And there's really no reason that I'm normalizing it. It's really just because I know a good measure of locality when I have a probability distribution, which is the entropy, right? Like um, entropy is maximum if it's a uniform distribution, and entropy is zero if you have only one token that influenced the internal feature. So for that reason, I normalize it and then just look at the entropy. So you could also look at other things like related to ring entropy or any other measure. But I want a measure that cares about the non-locality, which means I don't care whether these peaks appear earlier or later. I just care about how many like tokens that influence it, right? So entropy is a good measure for that. Um, yeah, so this is the key definition. Yeah, let me know if there's anything unclear. And then with this definition, we can analyze it. So this PT, this probability distribution is defined for each particular input. Right? So if I give you any input, it corresponds to particular vectors, and then you are doing like a little bit tuning around that to get this Jacobian. So it's dependent on the input. So what we did is okay, we take a model, like a small language model, and then we take a data set, right? Let's say Wikipedia pages or these kind of things. And then you just cut the data set into parts and then put every input in. And for every input, which correspond to a line in the left picture. So the picture on the left is just to show you what happens. Let's say you pick the feature. And for that feature, every line is like a heat map of PT. So like you get activated sometimes earlier in the text, sometimes later in the text. It's activated more when you are close by. So this kind of every line is a PT. So every line give you an entropy. And then the picture on the right is like that value of the entropy for all the features that are activated for a particular choice of the chunk of text for a particular sample. So for each sample, you get this picture on the right. Like every feature has some entropy, and for different input samples, different features are activated, right? So the leading ones, you look on the right side, the leading ones are these features, and then these features have some entropy that depends on the feature, and then the gray ones are like other features. So you see most of the features are having a very low activation, right? Because it's required to be sparse. And there's always a few leading ones, and then you can compute their entropy, and then you can like change you can like just go over this for all different samples, right? So this is a picture when you go over all different samples, like you look at different samples for the same feature, then the same feature has a higher entropy in some of the samples and lower entropy in some samples, so it has some distribution. And then this distribution also depends on the feature. Sometimes it's peaked more to the right, sometimes peaked to the left. And you see like different features have different entropy, right? Like some features peaks around 4 bits of information, some peaks around like 2, and so on. Any questions about the definition? Yeah.
So just to be clear, when you are computing the influence, this is with the representation given by an SAE?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Like that. Okay.
it's already trained. Yeah. So it's
I
like
see. I
there
see.
are models which are the model is open source and the SAE is also trained. The SAE is trained for every layer. So
Mhm.
you take the trained SAE and then take the gradient, which is basically like you take your feature gradient over the input of the embedding map and then take the gradient of that to the X.
Okay.
Yeah.
How would that be? Like, what would you expect if you were to do it with just the naive vector produced by the transformer?
Without the SAE.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm going to show later. It's actually
Okay.
not. It's following similar dependence. So
Okay.
so it's true. Like most of these entropy actually is already there. Like the dependence of the entropy in depth and so on. They are kind of already there in that dependence.
Maybe we hope that SAE will give us something more interpretable than the raw vector.
Yeah, there's some analysis later which may answer part of that. Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question. In the next slide, where you showed like a bunch of distributions, is that I guess the one after this, like the one with all the bar charts,
Mhm.
is that a feature of different languages? Like if you change the language, would the distribution very would
Different
the
lang
distribution, is there like universality here, or is this like a language dependent thing as well? Because you're training these transformers on particular languages.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't know if there will be a I would assume, I mean, like for models that are multi-language, certainly it
Mhm.
should be cross-language. Like the one Anthropic shows clearly shows that like the word in different languages with the same meaning, they activate the same feature.
I
Yeah,
see.
but these small models maybe they only train on English. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I was kind of trying to get to is how do we separate like the influence of a particular language from the structure of SAE as such to figure out what's the feature of the architecture versus what's a feature of the language that's influencing the result.
Yeah, it will be interesting to train two models in different languages and then compare whether the features have any way to compare with each other.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know any works like that. Yeah,
Okay.
that's an
Yeah, maybe
interesting
one could just
question.
translate the same sentences into two different languages and somehow check.
Yeah, like is there any feature that's sensitive to grammar, which will be very different between different
Mhm.
languages, and maybe some sensitive to the meaning will be very
Yeah.
the same, but
True.
I mean the interpret. Okay, so like maybe I'll talk about this. So the like these features, okay, we train these SAEs with the goal that they give me concepts that can be that we understand what they are, right? Like the Golden Gate Bridge. But actually doing that is hard because okay, so you get these features and they are supposed to represent things that are like common between different inputs, right? Something that's more meaningful than the token vector itself. But how do you know what it means, right? Uh, so the only way is just look at all the cases where it's activated and then think about it and give a target. So it's really not very systematic. So like this interpretation of features is basically done by like taking all the samples where this is activated and then let another LLM interpret it. Like
Yeah.
summarize what it means, right? So like there is this one like reference to individuals named Robert, right? That is a very feature very specific. And then there is like features that are like spatial position on after at the so like there's a lot of them which are not doesn't seem very useful.
Yeah.
And then there's like okay similar comparison as like scientific finding, yeah, so there's different meanings. And this diagram is showing that the entropy measure has some nice correlation with how abstract is the concept.
Mhm.
I mean, I think the color doesn't make too much sense because this is the color is also like what we ask the LLM to give, and it doesn't seem to be very useful. But anyway, so but the interpretation here is done in this Neuronpedia. So that was done in previous works. So, but if you look at it, right, like the name Robert, right, these things are very local. Right? It's just about a particular word. So the entropy is pretty low. And then like if you look at these uh, these features with a high entropy, like there's an uncertainty marker, right? Like whenever you say maybe, and then it has like these features have a high entropy because maybe like because if you see the word maybe, then you need to go back to look at many other words to think
Yeah.
about them, right? So it's kind of related. It's like it's not just if you think about if you hear about Robert, you just okay remember that's Robert. Right. So certainly some things are like if you look at summary, right? If you see the word summary, then probably you should look at the previous parts and then like try to summarize it. Right? That's what you're going to do next. So in summary, and then next word will depend a lot on what you say
Yeah.
later. So yeah, so it makes sense. But yeah, at least it's some confirmation that this entropy concept um, is sort of like a quantitative measure to something that's meaningful, but but we don't have any more quantitative way to see this. And
Would
this is
you
just yeah,
sorry for bothering you. I
yeah,
have one last question. Would you expect the entropy to change as you increase the context window, right? Because it should
yeah,
saturate at some point, I would imagine, as you keep
yeah.
increasing the context
I'll
window.
show you that in
Yeah.
two slides. Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Mhm.
So if you go back to the slide where you define the metric.
The define the gradient. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. If I just want like a very intuitive understanding of this, is this essentially just like quantifying like a surprise factor for like the token in a given context? Or is it is it storing more information than that?
Surprise. I'm not sure. Is that something defined? The
No,
surprise.
I'm just saying like if so let's say like a token hasn't popped up in your like previous training context and that token pops up here, is that expected to have a higher entropy than like tokens that have been like
Yeah, I
something?
don't think, no, I think that's a different kind of entropy. What you described is more like, okay, I have a prediction, and then how different is the next token from my prediction. Um, but here, I mean, that's the job of prediction is the last layer, right? The output. So the internal layers don't even know that, and they're not they're trying to think like doing some intermediate processing rather than predicting the next token. So this is more like also the thing you describe is only about that one point, right? It won't have a position dependence. So this one is like uh, in an internal layer, there is a feature being activated, and then I'm asking how much does that value of the activation, which means the feature vector amplitude, how the component of that feature vector, how much does that depend on the input?
I see.
Yeah, so it's like it's just a you have this higher dimensional function in this high dimensional space, and then you are varying your input a little bit and ask
Uh,
which one has a bigger effect.
so is it so if I understand correctly, is this expected to be high when this is expected to be like one of the orthogonal components? That's when you expect this to be high? Like
Orthogonal to what? I mean,
like
like
maybe
each
it's just like
FA is like one of the feature, like feature is a vector, right? And then you pick one of them.
so it's quantifying the importance of that like specific feature vector in getting to the output, or like
No. It's the other way. It's how much does because the feature is a function of the input, right? And because attention, right, feature is not just a function of that particular input at that same time. It's a function of all the previous time.
Right.
Right? Because all of them get attention to each other once again and again, and then gets here, right? So the feature activation, like let's say the feature Robert is activated to a value point two, and that depends on all the input token vectors. So you can take a gradient to them. So it's not talking about the feature vector influence to the future, it's talk about the feature influenced by the previous inputs.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, so maybe this picture helps to explain that, right? So this is saying, okay, if this feature Robert is activated, uh, then you compute this gradient, right? Then you see, okay, the gradient is mostly just here, right? It has nothing to do with the previous input here. So the color here shows the darker color shows a bigger influence. So if you look at other features, it's less trivial, right? So say this is a mention of competition and achievement. So that token get activated at these places for some reason, but then it has a bigger gradient to like previous parts. Um, which I couldn't tell like why the runner has a bigger effect on competition and achievements. I don't know, but there's some part like why this comma, the full stop has bigger effect. Yeah, a lot of these are hard to interpret, but okay, so this may be okay, maybe at least you see it's like having a bigger effect, like it was influenced more by the previous context than Robert, right? Like, okay, so you have like okay, symptom, enjoy, and these things has a bigger effect to will, yeah, something like this, and then okay, so these are just some examples we can take a look. And then this one I feel like tell you a little more that this entropy has some correlation with meaning. So this is comparing the entropy of nearby features. And what do I mean by nearby? This is you look at the decoding, right? So I have these features, and then I need to map them back to the token vector. So mapping them back is basically taking superposition of a bunch of a bunch of vectors, right? So let's say you have a four-dimensional output, and then you have this sparse feature. There's six of them. Then you have six vectors in the decoding map. And then your output is just a superposition of those which are like activated. Right? The gray ones are not activated, so they're zero. And then let's say these two red squares here, they are activated, and then your output will be a superposition of them. So so we look at these vectors. So every feature corresponds to a vector, which is the contribution of that feature to the output token vector. So you look at that vectors and do a similarity between them, and then find the similar features. So presumably these similar features have similar meanings, right? So they are like closer in terms of their contribution. And then you look at these similar features. So this picture here, this three-dimensional plot here, is showing that similar features have similar entropies. So like the features that contribute similarly to the output vector, they also have a similar entropy. They are probably also activated. I'm guessing that that's partly because they're activated in similar situations. And then so this picture is like the two-dimensional XY plane is like the clustering of the token vectors, right? So these decoding vectors, they are high dimensional, but there is a way to plot them as two dimensions, try to preserve their distance. So like you start with some feature like the diamond, and the diamond is like the Robert, right? This one, the one at the bottom, blue. And then the other ones are some other features we show in the previous slides. And then you take each of them and look at their neighbors, like the other features with close by. And then you see that okay, they have a similar entropy, which is the third dimension, right? Like the high entropy feature, the neighbors also have a high entropy. Yeah. So this is yeah. So I think there are two possible reasons, right? One is like the feature itself has a similar meaning, so they have similar entropy. But the other possible reason is they are just activated in a similar situation. I think, and then these entropies maybe just uh, have this difference, right? Variations over different samples. And and um, so um, maybe I should speed up a little bit. So there is a also we also studied the depth and the width dependence. So because we are interested in whether okay there is this causality. So when you go deeper in the layers, is it more non-local? And then the answer is yes. Like when you go deeper layers, it is more non-local. And I want to emphasize this is not trivially like just because of the structure of the network, right? Because your attention is totally non-local. So in principle, it's possible to have a feature just in the first layer, which depend on everything in the past. So it could be as non-local as the deeper layers, but probably that's not very economic, right? So probably you want to first do some lower level abstraction, and then you want to think more about them in the next layer, right? So what you see is indeed the entropy grows as a function of depth. And this is a more systematic picture where you compare the yeah, Chuqiao did this really impressive study of many different models. And then this picture is showing like this curve here is like a probability distribution over different samples, right? So you have an entropy that distribute, and then there is an average. And then coming back to the question Tamara asked earlier, so the token vector, the red dashed line, that's actually the entropy of the just the token vector itself. Like if you take that y and take derivative over x and look at the distribution of that, it has a similar entropy, right? Um, yeah, it has a similar entropy, and then the features have some distribution, and you see the distribution is pretty wide, and then the features have some distribution around that, but the average is similar to the token vector. And then also there is some saturation when you go deep layers. And and yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering about this saturation. That seems to be an interesting phenomenon. So are all of these like different models? I guess what do you think are the key differences between these different models, or is it the type of data? Like it is interesting to see that almost the concepts have a maximum entropy that they can be supported on, or maybe this is telling us we like there's no use in having too big of a context window or based on like
I
something like
suspect
this.
maybe this will be very different for bigger models. I mean, these smaller models, I suspect their capability is limited. So, like when I
Yeah.
go to deeper layer, in principle, I can have more abstract concepts, but probably they don't have the capability of like thinking about too complicated things. Because like if I look at the length dependence, okay, I have the length dependence. So this is the other dimension, right? So you go like the depth dependence is like going deeper, and the length dependence is like I just increase my input, like I
Yeah.
input a longer and longer text, and then you see the same kind of like the entropy grows. It doesn't saturate to the maximum entropy, right? The maximum entropy is log L, which is the maximal possibility you can have, and then it kind of grows, but then when you look at longer context, it saturates and then slightly decrease.
I,
So probably for the same reason, the depth dependence will also saturate because it's like, okay, even if you give me more context, I can only pay attention to these things one at a time, five bits. And
I,
then
I, yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I wonder how much this is a consequence of the tendency of large depth transformers to rank collapse. Because that just means like if I have, n independent tokens, the tendency is to like collapse them and cluster them at deeper layers. So even if you grow, you like if you're sufficiently deep enough, then there's only so many independent vectors after a certain number of layers, so that this is kind of like what I would expect if the train transformer is doing rank collapse.
yeah, that's a good comment. Yeah, yeah. And so yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting to analyze that when I mean, I assume like as we studied in this work with Aditya and Sriya, I think these models want to be on the critical points. They don't want to collapse too strongly, right? But maybe it will be interesting to analyze these trained transformers, what they are doing. In particular, these transformers has gone really far. Like now, the the small models today seems much better than like these earlier models like Petya. Like I mean, they are like even the 2B models, they look pretty good. So I think it'll be interesting to analyze them, in these other measures like the rank and, yeah, concentration. Okay, so basically that's all the key messages, and then this page is talking about uh, this comparison of the feature entropy, like the token vector entropy versus the features entropy. Like if you think about let's say these sparse autoencoders are good, so the y tilde is like y. So y tilde, as we showed earlier, is a superposition of these vectors, right? Each feature give you a vector, and then the weighted sum give you the y tilde. So if you look at the gradient of y tilde, is also just a weighted sum over these Jacobians of each feature. So roughly speaking, the influence of the inputs to a token vector is like a weighted superposition of the influence to each feature. Um, but that's not very precise because these vectors cannot be all orthogonal to each other. Right? So these vectors, they're not orthogonal. So if you look at this, it's not just a sum over each of them. But roughly speaking, if it is a sum, like if these features are sort of orthogonal with each other, then this is probably true. Like the entropy of the token vector is bigger than the average of the leading features activated entropy. And in numerics, we see they are comparable, but it's not like always one is bigger than the other because like these vectors are not orthogonal to each other. Yeah, so I don't have a concrete information there. Like ideally, I would want to see that these features are like sharper things, like in general, this token vector may be activated by maybe you have multiple features activated. Like I'm simultaneously thinking about multiple things, then each feature should focus on a separate thing. So maybe there's some entropy which tells me that they are kind of more concentrated, like they have a lower entropy than the whole vector. But I don't have a clear evidence for that. Also because like you only fire a few features every time, so the difference won't be very big. Okay, so in summary, I don't have, as you see, like this is preliminary. Like we do see that entropy is a good measure in the sense that it correlated with the meaning, it correlated with the semantic interpretation, and it's more quantitative than the semantic interpretation, right? So it tells us some more things that are quantitative about the sparse autoencoder, and it has a sense that there's some features that are more abstract than others. But there's a lot of open questions, of course. Like how do we um, see, like, is there, yeah, what kind of features are universal across models? We see some qualitative features that are universal across models, like the saturation of the like the increase as a function of depth and width, increase and then saturation, right? So that seems to be common across different models. And then the interesting question will be, is it possible to have some understanding of the dynamics? There are papers like from Anthropic and other papers about these circuits, which means like we learn some concepts from sparse autoencoders, but we also want to understand like which concept derives which concepts, like sort of understanding of dynamics. So that's very similar to like in holography, like we talk about this representation in the block, but we're interested in its dynamics. And then also, like there are other problems. Like for example, these papers I found quite interesting. They point out that these sparse autoencoder concepts, they're not what you want sometimes. Like for example, there is instead of like if you have um, concepts like apple, and then if you have text talking about apple and you have text talking about other fruits, and then you may end up getting features like apple and fruits that are not apple versus like apple and fruit, right? Like because you try to make these features overlap with less overlap, right? So it's like they are not trying to have like higher level concepts, including the lower level ones. Instead, they want to have things parallel, like A and B, but not A, and these kind of things. So yeah, so in general, I think there's a lot of open questions, and um, we should treat the LM as like an experimental system and just define all these kind of physics measures to them. And yeah, and this paper here last year was just another example where we test other features of other properties of LM using some physics tools. Okay, thanks.